I'd like to tell you about one client who often comes to mind. His name is not Dave. Dave was a passenger in his own car. Well, actually, it was his mother's car. And a buddy of his was driving it on a country road. The last thing Dave remembers is Buddy saying, "Watch this." Dave woke up hours later. Dave was covered in blood. It actually wasn't his blood. It was his buddy's blood. And he couldn't feel anything from his neck down. Dave had been made quadriplegic in the accident. This case was challenging. Dave's mother, an interesting lady, claimed that she hadn't allowed Dave to take the car that day. If that were true and it were accepted, then there wouldn't be any insurance on the car, and there'd be no money to pay Dave any compensation. That was a problem. Another problem was that Buddy was actually Dave's employer. And Buddy had claimed that they were in the course of employment, which is a magic phrase that means Dave would only be able to claim workers' compensation benefits and not make a lawsuit. That would have been a devastating loss to Dave beyond being made quadriplegic. Well, we investigated and we took statements, we reconstructed phone records, and we put together a timeline. And we were able to establish very clearly that Dave was off the clock. He had stopped working about 3 hours before, and he and Buddy had gone for basically a joyride. Well, this was, as you can imagine, a big case. Dave was young, early 30s. He was never going to work again, and he certainly was never going to live independently ever again. This was obviously a multi-million-dollar case. Now, you'd expect intuitively that a case like that would take a long time to resolve. Well, Dave didn't have time for that case to take years to resolve. You remember I mentioned his interesting mother. Well, Dave and his mother had a falling out. It's hard to understand how a mother could abandon her quadriplegic son, but that's exactly what happened. David wasn't married, he didn't have any kids, and his mother really would have been it. Luckily, he was taken in by a friend, but it was a very unstable situation. Dave needed to settle his case. I saw Dave every week, every 2 weeks. I was on the phone with his insurance company almost daily. And, well, I'll pat myself on the back. We wrapped up Dave's case 13 months after his accident. I'd like to say that's a commonplace occurrence. It isn't. It was something special, and it's something I'll always remember. Dave was able to buy a house. He was able to have it converted so that he could get around in his powered wheelchair. There was place for an attendant to live, actually a few. It's more work than one attendant can handle. And Dave has the money to pay for it. We got through a bunch of problems. The issue with his mother, claiming he didn't have consent to have the car, the workers' compensation issue, and Buddy claiming that he wasn't driving the car at all, that it was actually Dave driving. We got over that problem too. Dave's as okay as he can ever be. And I'd like to thank my team, who really dropped everything whenever necessary to make sure that Dave's case would be resolved quickly and quite literally for all the money.